name is Blackula!
Wait a minute. I'm getting tired of this. Don't throw him out. Shoot him down.
I am so thrilled to be playing for you tonight.
I'm delighted, Miss Watson. Now, may I have my hand back? Give me. Now this is the only way. You will be with me. Always.
What would possess a classically trained Shakespearean actor who performed Othello on Broadway and taught at prestigious universities to put on vampire things and become Blackula? The answer involves racism, revolution, and a decision that would haunt William Marshall for the rest of his life. Born in Gary, Indiana in 1924, William Thomas Marshall entered a world that had no intention of letting a black man become a classical actor. His father worked in the steel mills. His mother cleaned houses. But young William, he was reciting Shakespeare in his bedroom mirror, dreaming of stages that didn't want him.
My mother felt that I was becoming much too content with working in the steel mills there in Gary. Gary produced more steel than any place in the universe between the two world wars. And my sights needed to be raised, I guess, but she sent me there to visit with her wonderful sister.
By age 16, he'd already decided he wasn't going to be what America expected. He was going to be magnificent. And then something happened that nobody saw coming. Marshall didn't just study theater, he devoured it. New York University.
So that you can become a commercial artist. Now I know that you enjoy singing because you sang so much as a child.
The Actor Studio, the Old Vic in London. While other black actors in the 1940s were being offered butler and janitor roles, Marshall was in Europe studying with the masters. He became fluent in French, German, and Italian. He could fence. He could sing opera. He was, by every measure, one of the most educated actors of his generation. But America still saw his skin first. When he returned to the States in 1950, casting directors looked at this 6'5" giant of a man who could recite entire Shakespeare plays from memory and said, "We have a great role for you as a tribal chief." Marshall's response? He turned them down, all of them. For years, he refused to take stereotypical roles. He'd rather starve than shuffle. And he nearly did. While his white classmates from the Actor Studio were getting leading roles, Marshall was teaching theater at universities to pay his rent. But he kept studying, kept training, kept believing that his moment would come. Then in 1953, it finally happened. He landed the role of DeLoud in the Broadway production of The Green Pastures. Critics called his performance magnificent, commanding, royal. Suddenly, everyone wanted William Marshall, but they wanted him on their terms. Hollywood offered him roles as servants, slaves, and savages.
I have taken away this old man's daughter. It is most true. True, I have married her.
Marshall had a different idea. He started rewriting his own parts. When they cast him as a servant, he'd show up and play it with such dignity that directors would expand the role. When they wanted him to play ignorant, he'd slip in Shakespeare references that would make it past the censors. He was conducting a one-man revolution, one line at a time. By the 1960s, Marshall had become the go-to guy for any production that needed gravitas. The Boston Strangler, The Hell with Heroes, Zigzag, but always in supporting roles. Always the wise friend, the noble sacrifice, never the lead. Until 1972, when a phone call changed everything. American International Pictures wanted to make a black horror film. They had a title, Blackula, and a concept that was essentially Black Dracula. It was exactly the kind of exploitative role Marshall had spent his entire career avoiding.
Chasing tail could get you killed, you know.
I lost him because of you. Imbecile!
But then the producers made a mistake. They let Marshall read the script.
The character's name was Andrew Brown when they handed me the script. And Andrew Brown, as you may know, is a character in Amos and Andy of ages ago. That was not the finest thing that ever could have happened to us.
Marshall was furious. They wanted to name a black vampire after one of the most degrading characters in entertainment history. In 1972, they were still trying to slip in these insults.
And that they were interested in my playing the part. I explained that this was not a part that was going to be successful where they were concerned. They wanted to make money. This isn't it. I said, you need to have a property that will be of interest to your target audience.
Marshall insisted his character wouldn't be called Blackula. That was a slave name given to him. His real name would be Prince Mamawalde, an African prince seeking to end the slave trade. He wasn't evil by choice. He was cursed by Dracula for trying to save his people.
He's got to, when he becomes a vampire, he is no longer useful to his people. So he sets out from Africa, as I see it, trying to do something about putting an end to the slave trade.
The producers pushed back hard.
I think that will work. And we don't want to deal with the subject of slavery. I said, well, we didn't want to either. I had to. And I think that it hasn't been dealt with properly. This is a wonderful time to illustrate that there were African people who were concerned to the point that they wanted to do something about it. And that was true.
But Marshall wasn't done. He designed his own makeup. He choreographed his own death scene. He insisted on playing Mamawalde not as a monster, but as a tragic hero, Othello with fangs.
The British allow us in their homes and hotels, yes. But how?
His approach to the role was unique.
I told them that I would take care of the function, the work of the prince who wanted to free his people. You take care of the crazy creature.
Marshall separated the man from the monster.
Almost 2 centuries ago, the ruling elders of my people sent me, yes,
The humanity from the horror. And it worked in ways nobody expected. The film was shot in just 3 weeks. The budget was so low they could only afford 1 take for most scenes. But Marshall treated every moment like he was performing King Lear at the Royal Shakespeare Company. Then came one of the strangest moments of his career.
That's true. I remember the first day of filming in '72. It was somewhere in Hollywood. It was midnight, and they had taken me to a hotel to wait because I was to run from that hotel out into the dark street.
Marshall was sitting in the lobby in full makeup, cape, fangs, everything, when a Swedish woman approached him.
There was a very beautiful young woman who told me that she was Swedish, and she was standing there with a cape and in front of the camera. I thought they had brought her there. She was a part of the story.
But she wasn't. She genuinely thought he was a real vampire. The power of his presence, even sitting still, was that convincing. And then came the scene that would define his career. In the climax, as Prince Mamawalde chooses to walk into the sunlight rather than live without his love, Marshall didn't play it as horror. He played it as Shakespeare. As he delivered his final monologue, crew members started crying. The director called cut, and nobody moved. They just witnessed something nobody expected, a B-movie transcending its genre.
I say, were you looking for me? I guess I should have told you this evening that I decided to move my coffin. But then it was you who gave me the idea.
Critics who came to mock stayed to praise. The Los Angeles Times called Marshall's performance magnificent and tragic. But Marshall's victory was bittersweet. He'd proven a black actor could carry a horror film. He transformed exploitation into art. But Hollywood's response? They wanted him to do it again and again. Scream Blackula Scream, Abby, The Exorcist 3. Suddenly, the Shakespearean actor who'd spent decades avoiding stereotypes had become the king of black horror.
And medieval vampires. Good. That gives you something of an edge over the rest.
The irony wasn't lost on him. In interviews, Marshall was philosophical, but you could hear the frustration. He'd played Othello, King Lear, and Paul Robeson on stage. It was directed by Elia Kazan and performed with James Dean. But what would he be remembered for? Fangs and a cape. Yet Marshall never disowned Blackula. He understood what it meant to Black audiences who'd never seen themselves as anything but victims in horror films. He received letters from Black kids saying Blackula made them feel powerful. Black actors told him he'd open doors, but those doors came with a price. The typecasting was immediate and absolute. Casting directors could only see him as Blackula. Theater companies that once begged him to play Othello now wanted him for their Halloween specials. The same industry that had ignored his classical training for decades now wouldn't let him escape the cape. But there's a deeper story here about mentorship, about the giants who came before. In the early 1950s, Marshall met Paul Robeson, the legendary singer, actor, and activist who was being blacklisted for his political beliefs. Their first meeting changed Marshall's life.
His commitment, and he also had a great generosity of spirit. I've never seen it exercised in the fashion that Paul Robeson exercised his feelings about other people.
Within 10 minutes of meeting, Robeson was already opening doors. But Marshall's relationship with Robeson was complicated. They both played Othello, Robeson famously, Marshall later. And Marshall had thoughts about Robeson's interpretation.
And I realized that he hadn't realized himself as Othello in my thinking. And why was that? I saw that Jose Ferrer, who was playing Iago, was much too busy, just a little too disingenuous for the man to have accepted as he seemingly did, that his wife was unfaithful to him. Saying such a thing is just nothing worse than that in we men's eyes, in that sense. And so I realized that he had put the play a little off center, that Robeson essentially was not an actor, that he was a singer.
It was a bold critique from a younger actor. Marshall saw that Robeson, for all his talents, hadn't trained as an actor.
He was an inordinately talented man, but he hadn't trained to become an actor. He'd studied as a singer, and he was a lawyer, and those things that brought him to the public's attention. He did some fine work as an actor.
Yes.
But to do Othello or to do any of the Shakespearean roles calls upon a world of training.
Marshall tried to break free. He returned to the stage, winning rave reviews for The Merchant of Venice and Othello.
Wide revenge! Swallow them up!
He taught at California State University. He directed operas, but every interview, every article, every introduction started the same way. Blackula star, William Marshall. The tragedy was Shakespearean in its perfection. But there's something Marshall rarely talked about: why he never married. The answer was surprisingly honest.
Because I kept busy at my craft. When I found I was an only child also. I was accustomed to being alone a great deal. I started drawing and painting at a very, very early age.
He told the story of his cousin visiting when he was 8.
It was intolerable when my cousin, Pat, visited with us when I was about 8, and I think she was, maybe 5. And I was drawing and painting then. She came in and scratched up all of my, and I hated her. Then when she left, I never missed anybody as much as I missed her.
But he did adopt 3 sons, and he had a passion project that consumed him for decades, bringing Frederick Douglass to the screen.
So it is my main thrust, ultimately, to see that a film gets made on Fred, the subject of that life, as an example for a people.
Marshall saw Douglass as the antidote to the violence plaguing communities. He wanted to show what real struggle looked like, what real triumph meant.
To see what it requires, how much you have to invest in becoming a certain kind of person, and to do this on a collective basis. To know that the demands are going to be harsh, and they're going to be constant, and to know that it's possible.
When the blaxploitation era ended, Marshall found himself in a strange position. He was too typecast for mainstream roles, too classical for the new generation of Black filmmakers, too old for the leads he'd never been offered when he was young. But he understood something profound about the difference between working in America and abroad.
Quite different abroad. They weren't carrying the same manure. They carry it, but not the same. It didn't get in the way as much. because the objective was to put on the finest job possible.
But he kept working. Pee-wee's Playhouse, playing the king of cartoons with the same dignity he'd brought to Othello.
Let the cartoon begin!
The Fisher King, a small role where he managed to steal scenes from Robin Williams. Every performance, no matter how small, carried that martial gravity. He was still teaching until the end, still mentoring young Black actors, still insisting they learn the classics even if they never get to perform them. Marshall had a particularly interesting view on why his generation of Black actors struggled so much.
Well, it was a part of the so-called exploitation period in the early 70s, when there was an outcry on the part of Black artists and would-be producers, writers, for films that dealt with the lives of Black folk, because this had never really been done or considered very much.
He understood the historical context of his work. Every role was political. Every choice mattered.
Could have fit into very easily, since you say there isn't much material about us, although we have the richest history of any folk walking this earth.
On June 11th, 2003, William Marshall passed away from complications related to Alzheimer's disease. He was 78 years old. The obituaries all led with the same word, Blackula. But here's what those obituaries missed. Marshall didn't just play Blackula. He revolutionized what a Black actor could be in horror. Before him, Black characters in horror films were either first to die or comic relief. After him, they could be complex, tragic, powerful. Wesley Snipes' Blade exists because of Marshall. Every Black vampire with depth and dignity, they're standing on Marshall's shoulders. He took exploitation and made it exploration. He took stereotypes and made it Shakespearean. But perhaps his greatest role was the one nobody saw. The thousands of students he taught, the young Black actors he mentored, the scripts he quietly rewrote to add dignity to demeaning roles. The times he stood up to directors and said, "My character wouldn't say that." The revolution he conducted not with marches or speeches, but with performance and persistence. William Marshall wanted to be remembered as a classical actor. Instead, he became something else, a transformer of genres, a dignifier of the dismissed, a king who wore a cape not because he had to, but because he made it regal. In the end, William Marshall's story isn't about an actor trapped by typecasting. It's about an artist who took the only door Hollywood would open for him and transformed it into a cathedral. He didn't get to play King Lear on Broadway, but he turned Prince Mamuwalde into something just as tragic, just as noble, just as unforgettable. The steelworker's son from Gary, Indiana, had become royalty after all. Not the kind he dreamed of, but the kind he created. And perhaps that's the most Shakespearean ending of all.